I read a book about chameleons, and also around that time, I had read a book about the different stages of sleep. In REM sleep, when the brain is most alert, that's when people can sleepwalk and do things like that. So I thought maybe that if a chameleon starts dreaming, then it might change color because of what's going on in the dream.
A few years ago, Ikechukwu had an amazing vision. If he were to walk, say, through the nighttime forests of Madagascar, would he see flashes of rapidly changing colour in the trees?
Can chameleons change color while they are asleep?
A symphony of dreaming chameleons. Well, hold on tight, because we're about to find out. Welcome to The Conversation's Curious Kids, the podcast where a kid asks a great question and we find a very clever expert to answer it. So, all you curious kids out there, if you have a burning question, please write to us at curiouskids@theconversation.com and we will do our best to answer it. I'm Eloise, and today I'm joined by two people who just can't get enough of these fascinating colour-changing animals.
My name is Ikechukwu and I'm 10 years old.
Ike, as he goes by for short, is from Lagos, Nigeria.
And I'm a budding microbiologist.
That's cool. Okay, so I don't actually know what microbiology is. You'll have to explain to me.
Microbiology is the study of bacteria and viruses and basically just cells.
Very cool. What is it you like about microbiology then?
Well, I've just liked how a cell doesn't have consciousness, but if you combine a lot of cells, you can create something that does have consciousness.
That is a very, very good answer. What do you think, Russell?
I love it. I'm excited that you're a budding microbiologist, and some of what we're going to be chatting about today with chameleons definitely falls into the realm of microbiology.
And this is our chameleon expert.
My name's Russell Ligon. I'm a biologist.
And a recent postdoctoral researcher at Cornell University in the USA.
I've studied chameleons for about 10 years, and the thing that fascinates me most about chameleons is their ability to change colors.
Today we're going to dive deep down into the nitty-gritty of how these amazing animals do this. But before we look at if chameleons change colour while they're asleep, how do they change colour when they're awake?
Do you know anything about in the skin of an animal, like a chameleon or a fish that's changing color? Do you know anything about how that happens?
Well, there are special cells that contain sacs of color and they can either spread out or contract, which makes the animal lighter or darker.
Yes, okay, yeah. I think you should be leading this conversation because you're already clearly an expert. Yeah, those color-changing cells are called chromatophores.
Chromatophores. These cells contain two different ingredients that help them change colour. The first is pigments, or, as Ike says, sacs of colour.
These pigments, as they spread out or contract, they can affect the lightness or the darkness of the animal.
Some of these cells are known as xanthopores, and they are responsible for making one end of the rainbow.
The pigments the chameleons have in their xanthophores, whether it's a yellow or an orange or a red or some combination, that gives them those parts of the color palette.
The other type of colour-changing cells contain not pigment, but crystals.
There are also special cells called iridophores. They work differently than these pigment cells. So rather than the pigment cells, which are working primarily by absorbing specific wavelengths of light, these iridophores are working to reflect particular wavelengths of light. I think of these as like stacks of little mirrors inside their skin cells. They're called reflecting platelets, but basically these iridophores can change their direction that they're facing and how many of them are stacked in a row or spread out. If they're facing one way or they're stacked a particular way, they might reflect more white light. If they change their orientation, they might actually reflect lower wavelengths of light, and so they might reflect more blue or purple kind of colors.
So the iridophores form like a kind of prism on the chameleon skin?
Yes, I think that's a very excellent way of thinking about that, EK.
If you want to know more about how reflecting light makes colour, look out for our episode, Does Magic Really Exist? For now, you just need to remember that pigment cells make the oranges and reds on a chameleon's skin, and crystal cells make white, blue, and violets. It's like, say if you're a painter, you might have access to some paints or oil pastels or like colouring pencils. So you have like a range of tools at your disposal to make different kinds of colours. Is that a fair analogy?
I love it.
Cool. There is one more colour that we haven't talked about yet. Any idea what it is? That's right, black. Welcome to our grand finale. My favourite, most fascinating cell, the melanophore. So I think that the melanophores, they're extremely cool cells. So maybe we could talk a little bit about how those work, because I just think they're fascinating.
Well, yeah, and they tie to EK's interests as a budding microbiologist. So do you know what melanin is, EK?
It's the color that affects the lightness and darkness of your skin. That's why people who live in warmer climates have darker skin than people who live in colder climates.
That's right, yeah. So we share that same pigment with many different animals. And the difference is that some of the animals, like chameleons, can change where that melanin is at any given time point, and so they can get lighter or darker.
And they work in the most incredible way.
Melanophores, they often have kind of a star-like structure. They have these long, they're called dendrites or arms.
Like a starfish?
Yeah.
Hold your hand out in front of you, with your palm facing upwards and all your fingers pointing to the sky. That's the way that these cells are positioned beneath a chameleon's skin.
And basically, the melanin pigments are located entirely within this star-like structure. If the melanin pigments migrate up each of your fingers, they'll be towards the surface of the skin, and they will make the chameleon's skin look dark. But if you imagine the pigments moving back down your fingers, kind of towards your palm, towards a section of the melanophore that's buried, it's deeper, it's going to look brighter or whiter because they're hidden.
Cool, so you just have like the whole rainbow spectrum being taken care of by these different cells.
You do. Collectively, they give chameleons the ability to change the entire spectrum of colors, but individual animals generally don't have the ability to change all of those colors because each of those components, the xanthophores, the iridophores, the melanophores, may not be present for that species.
So, collectively, chameleons have the capacity to paint the rainbow. But why do they do this at all? Turns out that there are three main reasons, and I think you might already know number one.
What eats a chameleon?
That's a really good question.
I've never known that, and I want to know what they have to camouflage against.
Camouflage, or blending into your surroundings to hide from predators.
So, chameleons are tasty and they are slow. What's a predator that you can think of that might be up in the tops of trees where many chameleons live?
A snake, a monkey, a jaguar maybe.
Jaguar, sure. Be a little light snack for a jaguar. And what's something else? What's a different non-mammal, non-reptile predator?
Maybe an owl or something like that.
Yes. Yeah. So there are many species of birds that have been documented eating chameleons.
Oh my goodness, there are so many animals lining up at the chameleon buffet. But this is why their rainbow skills are so important. But they don't get out the same paints every time. No. They are much cleverer than that.
There have been a number of studies of these South African dwarf chameleons that show that they can actually change color differently depending on whether you show them a model of a snake or a bird.
Cool. But why would they do that?
Because there are several animals that can only see a few colors or can't see in color at all.
Yeah, you're right, EK. Animals vary in their ability to see color, to see light, to see patterns.
So we humans can see all the colours of the rainbow, from red right the way to violet. But birds can see beyond that spectrum, making them extremely scary predators.
Chameleons change color in a way that makes them blend in better to the given background based on the visual capabilities of the predator that's near to them. So it's not exactly like they turn green for this situation and blue for this situation. It's for birds, they are able to slightly better match their background and blend in based on the way the birds see the world. And it's a slightly different kind of set of colors that they use when faced with the snake, because that different set of colors makes them blend in better relative to what the snake would see.
I think that's amazing.
Number 2. The second reason why chameleons change colour is because, like us, they need to chill sometimes and warm up.
One thing that a lot of these color-changing animals have in common is they need help from the outside to regulate their body temperature.
When warm-blooded animals like ourselves get cold, we shiver or rub our hands together, or even just put on more clothes. But chameleons cannot do that.
So if they go out in the sun and they need to warm up at the start of the day, a chameleon will often be quite dark. Do you know how a dark black would interact with the sun?
Dark is the color that traps the most heat.
Yes. What would happen if they get too hot?
They'll turn lighter.
Yes, exactly right. Because white does what with light?
Well, it reflects most of it.
Ike, you're so good. Yeah. So this is like a key adaptive benefit of the color changing ability. It's called thermoregulation. It's the ability to be in charge and take some control of their body temperature.
Number 3. When chameleons aren't chilling, they've got a lot of other important business to be dealing with.
What is one of the other reasons that an animal like a chameleon would change colors?
They can change color because of their emotions. So if they're feeling scared or angry or happy, they can change color.
Yeah, they can. And they use that ability very well. So chameleons are thin branch arboreal specialists. And what that means is they can occupy and use as highways, places to hunt and mate and defend territories way out on the thin branches of trees. And I bring this up because it's related to why color change is so important for a chameleon. A chameleon that's up in a tree can't really run away from another chameleon if they get in a fight. So he or she has got to be able to communicate either aggression or calmness or even submission, saying that they've lost a fight.
And chameleons in battle is Russell's area of expertise. A few years ago, he did a study on a species called the veiled chameleon.
I was focused on males, and when they find themselves face to face with another male, they have a few options. One option would be if they don't want anything to do with the interaction, they can kind of just crouch down, remain rather dull and plain. But often when you put two adult male chameleons together, they will start to show off. They will try to figure out who is the boss and whose territory that is. The most prominent elements of the veiled chameleon's color are they have these vertical stripes along their body. During kind of normal day-to-day life, those might be kind of a tan or a light brown. But when they get aggressive, they have these bright yellow stripes along their body, including several on their head. So in addition to these bright yellow stripes, there's kind of turquoise spots, there's bright greens, yellows, orange. These guys are beautiful, in my opinion.
So chameleons might just be my new favourite animal. All these different ways they can change colours, and for so many different reasons, while they're awake. So what about when they're sleeping?
So chameleons do change color when they are sleeping. But it doesn't seem to be such an active process like they're using during one of these social interactions. It seems to be that they generally get quite pale as they sleep. And that's actually one of the ways that chameleon biologists or anyone who's interested in chameleons can find them. They'll go searching at night because with a torch or a headlamp, the chameleons tend to stand out. So when you first see this sleeping chameleon, it's pale. But if you go and shine your light on it, hold it there for 30 seconds or a minute, all of those skin cells that are in contact with the light will turn dark. And so you can darken one side of the chameleon and the other side of the chameleon is completely pale. It's quite fun. That brings us to your main question, Ike.
Do chameleons change color while they dream?
Yeah, I love this question. And I don't have the answer. I think that if chameleons have the capacity to dream, then I think it's very likely that someone in the future will find them changing colors in their sleep in response to those dreams that they are undergoing. No one has done that for chameleons yet, but they have done it for octopuses.
And more specifically, an octopus who goes by the name of Costello. A few years ago, this beautiful Brazilian reef octopus came to live in a tank at New York's Rockefeller University. And the scientists there started to notice something strange. He would wake up from sleep and he'd be a bit disturbed and he'd start, being a bit aggressive and attacking this pipe. And what they think is that maybe he was recalling something that had happened to him that was quite stressful before he came to this tank. And one time, he turned deep red and spun around on the floor of the tank and thrust his tentacles out, and he released a massive cloud of ink.
What do you think, if you were an octopus, Ike, what kinds of dreams would make you feel, worried or defensive?
Dreaming of a predator.
Yeah.
Like an eel or a shark. In other words, poor Costello was having a nightmare.
I can see why you'd mistake the pipe for an eel.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe there were no eels around, so he just went for the closest one. So the mystery of chameleons changing colour while dreaming remains. But a recent video might provide us with a little clue. In western Madagascar, a female Labor's chameleon was filmed as she died. And amazingly, as the life slowly passed out of her, her skin flashed rapidly and dramatically, going through all the colours of the rainbow. Russell doesn't know for sure why this happened, but he does have a theory.
The mechanisms of color change is controlled by kind of your nervous system and hormones. I imagine that those are probably going haywire at the time of death, near death. Different hormones are probably spiking, or your nervous system is crashing. And I think probably the chaotic combination of those elements is probably involved in this color change shown by this dying chameleon.
But Ike has another theory.
Is it true that your life actually flashes before your eyes before you die? If it was, then that would be a very good explanation for why her color was changing.
Yeah, that's very cool and poetic. Well, maybe you'll have to get into animal cognition and you can be the one that does the study for us and tells us the answer. How about that?
I think I'd rather stick with microbiology.
Fair enough. Challenge not accepted. Thank you so much for today, Ike, and thank you so much for your questions.
Yes, I enjoyed it.
I had a great time. Thank you, Ike. Thank you, Eloise.
It was very educational. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of The Conversation's Curious Kids. If you've got a question for us, please do email us at curiouskids@theconversation.com and we will do our very best to answer it. With thanks to Ike, Russell Ligon and Gemma Ware, the executive producer of this episode. It was produced, presented and sound designed by me, Eloise. See you next week.